Kath Soucie, the woman who has provided her voice for countless cartoons over the last 35-plus years, is considered one of the most talented and ubiquitous female voice-over artists of the modern animation era. While very well known professionally among fans and colleagues, not much is known about her personally. However, the million-dollar question that has been swirling around the internet about her for more than a decade is: was she born in 1967 or 1953? This issue has largely divided much of the online world, with one side arguing for the former and the other side for the latter. But with all that said, which is more factually correct? I'm Kay Mendelsohn, and in this video, we take an in-depth look at the veteran voice actress and her true date of birth. For those who grew up in the 1980s and 90s, the name Kath Soucie has been synonymous with many people's favorite cartoon characters. Some of her most memorable roles include, but are not limited to, Princess Sally Acorn from Sonic the Hedgehog, also known as Sonic Sat-AM, twins Philip and Lillian DeVille from Rugrats, as well as their mother Betty in the original series, the replacement voice for Janine Melnitz from The Real Ghostbusters, Linka from Captain Planet, Fifi LaFume and Lil Sneezer from Tiny Toon Adventures, and the iconic animated rabbit and girlfriend to Bugs Bunny, Lola from Space Jam, and later New Looney Tunes. While often humorous in nature, the characters she plays range from cutesy, sometimes tough, young girls and boys, to mature, sensual, motherly, and even butch women, really stretching her vocal abilities as an actress. With a hugely successful career, expanding 4.5 decades, she has become something of an introvert and recluse in the entertainment industry, rarely doing interviews or making public appearances. Aside from a love of kayaking on the Pacific Ocean, near her Southern California home in her spare time, very little is known about Soucie's private life, including her marital status, and any family or friends she has outside of work. In a 2021 Facebook post that has very sadly been lost, an anonymous woman claimed to have seen and talked to her at a coffee shop in the small town of Aptos, California, on an unspecified date in 1994. The female author, who was either a child or much younger adult back then, also claimed to have had no knowledge of Soucie's fame or career at the time of the meeting. This post became of particular interest with one fan, who himself is from Santa Cruz County, and was either 10 or 11 years old when the alleged incident occurred. Why Soucie was in Northern California in '94, and to where was she heading, if anywhere at all, remain unknown to this day. However, with Soucie's lack of presence on social media, the validity of the story can neither be confirmed nor denied. Aside from a speeding ticket she received in 2001, while running late to a ceremony honoring Rugrats with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, Soucie's life and career have remained virtually free of crime or scandal. However, when it comes to the internet, she has not been exempt from some form of controversy. In early 2021, when the upcoming sequel to Space Jam was trending online, she had remained silent on both the redesign and voice actress change of the Lola character, despite this tweet from The Hollywood Insider, posted nearly 2 weeks after the movie's release in July. Kath Soucie had been set to reprise her role as Lola Bunny, and had all of her dialogue recorded. But for unknown reasons, she was replaced by Zendaya during late post-production. Though Space Jam: A New Legacy was ultimately a box office failure, even so much as getting banned in China, and winning 3 out of 4 Golden Raspberry Awards, for which it was nominated in 2022. One very likely theory is that Soucie had signed a non-disclosure agreement with Warner Brothers, preventing her from talking to the press, and bringing about any negative publicity or potential loss of profits, despite the studio's most recent controversy of indefinitely shelving movies, like Batgirl and Coyote vs. Acme, for tax write-off purposes. However, Because of her extremely shy and enigmatic nature, it is also very likely that Soucie herself has voluntarily chosen to remain tight-lipped about drama behind the scenes, in order to prevent fuel to the fire, and any potential lawsuit against her. On April 27, 2023, she was noticeably absent from the Season 2 launch party for the Rugrats reboot, which also served as a reunion for the cartoon's principal voice actors. As per the time this video was made, no explanation has been given to her whereabouts of that day, but it can be speculated that she was unable to attend the event due to a very busy work schedule, an illness or injury, or some kind of personal or family crisis. The biggest controversy about Kath Soucie for many years on the internet pertains to her date of birth. As of early 2024, sites like Google have listed it as February 20, 1967, making her 57 years old, while others like Rotten Tomatoes and various public records sites have listed it as November 18, 1953, making her 70 years old. The Internet Movie Database, or IMDb, has often gone back and forth on both birthdays, without rhyme or reason. While public records have proven to be more reliable and accurate with people's information, they have very curiously received heavy criticism from Internet users, who often dismiss them as fake information websites. On the surface, either birthday would appear to be valid, seeing how Soucie has been an adult since the onset of her voice acting career in the mid to late 80s. Fans have often chosen which one they believe is the truth, with some ridiculous enough to celebrate it on both 20 and 11/18, foolishly believing her to be two different ages. But how exactly can anyone have two birthdays between January 1st and December 31st, and be born in two very separate years? The long and short answer to that is, it is not even remotely possible, even with the most flexible of logics. However, with certain developments about her appearing online in recent years, one of the birthday theories simply does not compute from a timeline perspective at all. While a good number of her fans have simply taken whatever information is given to them at face value, some have gone to extreme lengths to find the truth, and go beyond the superficial, including meeting up and interacting with numerous colleagues of hers online, or in person, finding any hidden details at their own discretion. Born Catherine Ellen Soucie, sometimes going by Kathy with an I, and sometimes Kathy with a Y. Not much is known about her early years or family, especially with how very little she has publicly revealed about herself. However, various online sources and tips have provided clues into her upbringing. In a 2008 interview she had done with Bart Simpson voice actress and longtime colleague Nancy Cartwright, Soucie has had a love of acting since she was a very young child, performing in numerous plays and amateur productions. She also loved watching classic movies, adoring Hollywood stars of the time, such as Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn, and Audrey Hepburn. No relation, Ingrid Bergman, and perhaps her biggest idol, Lucille Ball. This piece of information alone should serve as an inkling that she was born sometime in the 1950s, especially with I Love Lucy being one of the most popular sitcoms during the early years of television, continuing to air in reruns to this very day. Soucie has also cited Frank Welker as one of her heroes, which she credits as her inspiration for transitioning into voice-over work, and would be among her many long-time colleagues. Her birthplace, while not as controversial as her birthdate, has much of the internet split on that issue as well, with some claiming that she was born in New York City, New York, and others claiming that she was born in Cleveland, Ohio. While it is possible to be born in one city and raised in another, according to an old mentor of hers from the 70s named Paul Caffin, that a fan had directly spoken with on Facebook, Soucie was actually born in the town of Newburyport, Massachusetts, just northeast of Boston. For unknown reasons, she and her family moved to Ohio when she was just a baby, where she would grow up. However, it is unclear whether she actually resided in Cleveland, or in the nearby suburban town of Parma Heights, where she attended high school. Found in the 1971 Valley Forge High School yearbook, and going by the name Kathy, Her senior portrait suggests that she was much older during this time than what most people would believe, and had graduated in June of that year at age 17. During her attendance, she was in drama club, glee club, and 2 choir groups. Just from the fashion sensibilities in that yearbook alone, the pictures of her, as well as the rest of the student body, are unmistakably from the early 70s, with one page of it mentioning the glee club doing a rendition of Bridge Over Troubled Water, the wildly popular song from the wildly popular musical duo, Simon and Garfunkel. This raises another question for those who believe Soucie's birth year is 1967. How can she be born in the same year that she began high school and graduate 4 years later? In the words of Ron Burgundy,
that doesn't make sense.
According to her story in the 2004 Tim Lawson and Elisa Persons book, The Magic Behind the Voices, a who's who of cartoon voice actors, after high school, Soucie attended an undisclosed college to study the culinary arts, intending to become a chef. Though she still retained her childhood dreams, she chose cooking as a more practical career to fall back on, in case acting didn't work for her, or she would not make it big as an actress. In the mid to late 70s, she attended the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City, where she studied under the tutelage of the late Manu Tupu. Just to make ends meet, she worked a series of odd jobs, including selling jewelry, which she soon quit after finding out that the merchandise she obtained from her employer was stolen. Her time on Broadway was brief when she discovered that she didn't have adequate vocal projection for stage acting, especially with extensive microphone systems being non-existent in the 70s. All this information should leave no doubt that she was in her 20s at this time, and that her voice acting career was still years away. Soucie's only well-known on-camera role was a mother-to-be-named Becca, in the made-for-TV movie, The Incredible Journey of Dr. Meg Laurel, starring Lindsay Wagner of Bionic Woman fame, James Woods, and future Growing Pains star Tracy Gold, who was roughly 9 years old at the time. Members on the site Wikipedia, who have been debating her real date of birth since 2011, have cited this movie as an example to suggest that she is much older than the more widely accepted narrative. Calculating basic math, and the movie's broadcast date of January 2, 1979, had she been born in 1967, she would have been about 11 years old, both during filming and the time of its release. However, had she been born in 1953, she would have been roughly 24 years old during filming, and 25 upon release. Based on her appearance in the movie though, it should be crystal clear that Soucie was a mature and developed woman in the late 70s, and not a preteen, with some people likening her to actress Sissy Spacek, who would be roughly 4 years Soucie's senior. It should also be noted that no self-respecting studio or director would ever greenlight a project where a prepubescent girl gets pregnant and gives birth, as it would be both highly inappropriate and illegal. While clips and full episodes of it are extremely rare and hard to find on the internet or any physical media, according to IMDb, Soucie also appeared in an episode of a very obscure late 70s TV drama called The Runaways. Both the age and nature of her character in that show are unknown, but it can be surmised that she had played a teenager, especially with many adult actors in their late teens and 20s back then, including Scott Baio in the pilot episode, still being young enough to play those types of roles in movies and television. Information about her career between the early to mid-1980s may be missing, but in her story in The Magic Behind the Voices, just prior to her switching to voice acting full-time, Soucie had auditioned for the part of a young daughter in an unknown TV soap opera in 1985, but got rejected due to her age. She never specifies in the book how old she was, but, going back to basic math, and depending on the date of the audition, she would have been either 31 or 32 years old that year, had she been born in 1953, which is arguably way past the normally accepted age range for an adult actor to play that kind of character. It should be noted, however, that every production in Hollywood varies in terms of what actors they want to hire to play certain characters. Since the 1950s, many studios have been more partial to hiring adults between the ages of 18 and 29 to play teens, as they can work longer hours on sets and not be subject to child labor laws. However, in some very rare cases, actors in their 30s can be hired to play these roles as well. Though for the sake of argument, using grade school math again, had Soucie been born in 1967, she would have been an actual teenager in 1985, which would be more age-appropriate to play a young daughter, making absolutely no sense to her rejection, unless she fell short of a certain requirement, or the issue was completely unrelated to age. Though Soucie can be heard in many cartoons in the late 1980s, including as Princesses Starburst, and Tiffany in My Little Pony, Ingrid Minx Kruger in later seasons of Jem and the Holograms, and Janine in The Real Ghostbusters, following the departure of Laura Summer, her very first voiceover role came in the often forgotten Rambo, The Forces of Freedom, where she played minor characters. She states that 1986 was a very difficult time in her career, as she felt as if she were having to start over, often cold-calling many production companies in an attempt to sell her talent. Also, with regards to the 1967 birth year theory, it would be highly unlikely that she would simply enter the voice acting field at the hypothetical age of 18, just fresh out of high school, without a single professional acting gig on her resume, an institution to train her in that field, or even a mentor to help improve her skills. While voice acting today is an extraordinarily large, but competitive field, especially with the presence of the internet, many anime dub-overs, and animation appealing to both kids and adults, such was not the case back in the 1980s, as that profession was not very popular, particularly for many aspiring actors in which to start out, and not perceived very well by Hollywood, or the Screen Actors Guild. Setting aside stories of horrid working conditions for many studio artists of the time, including the outsourcing of animation to Japan and Korea, at much cheaper costs, many cartoons of that era were viewed primarily as children's entertainment, often with the main objective to sell toys. However, Soucie and many of her future colleagues would choose to transition into voice-over work, some inspired by legends of the past, after gaining lots of professional experience in acting in the 80s, or earlier. It should also be noted that a good number of them, including Soucie herself, had grown weary of the limitations and restrictions of on-camera acting, and hoped to find other avenues to expand their talents and careers. As Homer Simpson voice actor, and Soucie colleague Dan Castellaneta had once stated, "You can be a bad actor and still have a career, but if you are a bad voice-over person, you are not going to make it." This quote would become particularly poignant, not just with Soucie and many of her colleagues replacing certain veteran actors, who are either deceased or too old to play beloved characters in popular franchises, but with modern-day Hollywood's mistreatment of the veteran voice acting community. In an act known as stunt casting, major movie studios would hire big-name stars of the time, with little to no experience in the field, for their films, in lieu of greater talent. Aside from the aforementioned Zendaya Coleman over Kath Soucie, as Lola Bunny in Space Jam 2, other examples include Chris Evans over Tim Allen from the Toy Story franchise, as the titular character in the 2022 box office bomb Lightyear, and Chris Pratt over Charles Martinet, as the titular character in the 2023 Super Mario Bros. Movie. Predating the 21st century, 80s pop singer Tiffany would voice daughter Judy over the late Janet Waldo in the 1990 Jetsons movie, though Waldo would be cast in a smaller role. Despite all these veteran actors playing their respective characters for years, breathing lots of life into them, they have more often than not been treated like second-class citizens by top studio executives. Going back to the issue of Kath Soucie's age, some of her fans have gone to great lengths to dig up the facts, even so much as contacting some of her old colleagues to inquire about her real birthday, when the internet in general has not been of much help. One fan in particular had been in contact with voiceover artist C.G. Daly from Rugrats, and Nika Futterman from Hey Arnold. Both have claimed that to 2067 is completely false, but still remain in the dark on the matter. One of her colleagues, Phil Lamar from Futurama and The Weekenders, claims that Soucie may be more comfortable with the much younger birthday and embarrassed about having her personal life all over the internet. It is a fact that while there have been those in the entertainment business who have lied about their ages and other facts about their lives, some on their own free will, there have been others who have been manipulated by handlers to hide the truth, to sell themselves better, and look more appealing in Hollywood. especially in the days prior to the internet, when public information about celebrities was not as easily accessible. It is very unlikely that the 2067 birth date came from Soucie herself, though one popular theory is that it originated from an agent or manager of hers who suggested she use it to help her gain more voice acting roles in the industry. A less common theory is that a misunderstanding or clerical error on a website dedicated to Futurama fandom confused her birthday with fellow cast member David Herman, who was in fact born on February 20th, 1967. On January 20th, 2023, Angelica Pickle's voice actress Cheryl Chase had wished her Rugrats colleague a happy birthday on Facebook, without giving away Sousie's age or year that she was born. One of Chase's followers had corrected her in the comments section and presented her with a screenshot from a public records website, causing her to later change the text in her post. Nearly 3 years prior, on February 21st, Space Jam and Futurama colleague Billy West had wished Soucie a happy birthday on Twitter, most likely alluding to the 220 theory. In August 2021, that same fan was in contact with what he initially believed to be Kath Soucie on Facebook, only to quickly discover he was communicating with a scam artist after he was asked to buy a very specific gift card for them. After suspicions arose, he quizzed them about her age and date of birth, to which they said she was 54 and born on February 20th, giving the more international format of day before month. He told them twice that they were wrong and that they had just failed his test. On February 20th, 2023, more than a month after initiating contact with an old friend of Sousie's from Ohio named Jimmy Holland, that he had met through a post on a Facebook group dedicated to the voice actress, he messaged Jimmy and asked about her true birthday after numerous fans on the internet gave her their best wishes that day, believing she had turned 56. Despite not including the month or day, Jimmy stated that 1953 was the real year she was born, to which he thanked him. According to voice actor Greg Berg, a former Soucie colleague from the early 90s Saturday morning cartoon, Yo Yogi, he states that much of the entertainment industry does not get certain people's information correct. Most of what is taken comes from clerical errors, sometimes used as placeholder text on websites, or misguided sources who take whatever information is fed to them, where it spreads around the internet like wildfire, often misconstrued as gospel truth. Sometimes, as previously mentioned, a false younger birth date is issued by talent agents or management companies to help actors gain better employment and cope with much of Hollywood's age discriminatory practices. In the case of Berg, one unnamed media source incorrectly listed his place of birth as Sacramento, California. In actuality, he was born in Brooklyn, New York, and even once had to show some form of ID to someone at an unknown establishment, as proof that he really was who he said he was. On November 18, 2023, Reddit user, CommonGuy83, made a post to various subreddit groups, including one he founded himself called R. Sociology, dedicated to the legendary voice actress, wishing her a happy birthday, alluding to her turning 70 years old that day. While many people in those communities were eager to follow, some were critical of the post, still believing the 1967 theory. Even when Common Guy replied to some of his critics with a link to an article he had written on that subject, also titled 22067 or 111853, a good number of them, particularly on R. Futurama, condemned it as misinformation, with hundreds of discrepancies. The following day, the R. Sociology group received a comment on the birthday post from user Independent Humor 74. The comment is far too long to read, but they state that Canadian voice actress and singer Melanie Brown, sometimes going by Melanie Melody, or even her stage name, Mel Fresh, best known as the voice of Cheer Bear in the 1980s Care Bears cartoon, has claimed herself on her website to be born on May 12, 1969, making her 54 years old, as of current date. They also calculate basic math and detail a number of inconsistencies in various points in her career with the alleged birth date, including Brown's first movie role as a nude model in 1978's Sketches of a Strangler. her traveling to New York to study acting at 21 years old, her being an audience member in the first 3 or 4 seasons of Saturday Night Live, her sounding a lot like a middle-aged woman in many 80s cartoons, including her role as a 10-year-old in the 1980 special, Easter Fever, and her husband being 25 years older than she is, with a son now in his late 30s, as of 2024. They also suggest her being a hypothetical teenager, and possibly groomed by her future husband, in the mid-80s before getting pregnant, but acknowledge the age of consent in Canada as 16. While Independent Humor believes that the actress/singer was most likely born in either 1953 or 1954, they acknowledge that Brown still has a very young-looking appearance, which would run consistent with the theory that some people in Hollywood alter their ages to help boost their careers, going by the philosophy that youth sells. Voice actress Debbie Derryberry, who has worked with Soucie on the adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, Lady and the Tramp 2, Scamp's Adventure, and a 2001 commercial for Mountain Dew, has also had her birthday curiously altered on the internet. While it is agreed unanimously that September 27th is the day she was born, some websites like Google also claim her birth year as 1967, despite public records showing it as 1960, and old yearbooks from Indio High School, in Indio, California between 1975 and 1978, then going by her maiden name Greenberg, corroborating that evidence. Also, in late 2022, nearly 3 months after her birthday, a fan had directly contacted Derryberry about the issue on social media, where she confirmed with him firsthand that 1960 is in fact her real birth year. Ultimately, what people want to believe, what they see or read about online or elsewhere, is up to them. However, since she remains an anomaly in Hollywood, as well as the realm of voice acting, sparing many details about herself, the issue of Kath Soucie's birthday will most likely remain an open mystery until her retirement and inevitable demise. Some argue that a person's biography pales in comparison to their long-standing professional career, and that one's age is completely irrelevant to their tremendous talent. Others argue that in order to fully appreciate someone's gifts and accomplishments, one has to acknowledge their origins and rise to fame, as well as any struggles along the way. Their stories should always be preserved both in life and in death, not just for future generations who wish to learn from them, but for those who aspire to be voice-over artists themselves. While Kath Soucie will most likely take certain aspects of her life and career to her grave, the truth about her, as well as her real age and date of birth, will eventually become public knowledge. Thank you for watching this video. For any thoughts you may have, please leave a comment and share. For more information on Kath Soucie, please check out the links in the description, as well as the book, The Magic Behind the Voices, by Tim Lawson and Elisa Persons.